After nearly 2 years of tough negotiations, researchers have finally got their hands on a huge amount of data. Through an initiative called Social Science One, Facebook has given a group of independent academics access to a trove of raw data in an effort to study the way its users share information and misinformation. The data consists of URLs that you and I are likely to have seen via Facebook, 38 million of them, each one viewed at least 100 times publicly on Facebook. Researchers can see details like whether these shared links were fact-checked or flagged by users as hate speech. And then they can see broad demographic information about the people who viewed, liked, or shared these links, and even gather some rough sense of the political affiliations of those users. Now, all of this is eventually going to tell us just how little we know, or we've known before, about what social media may be doing to our friendships, attention of span, and even democracy itself. I want to bring in NBC's Jake Ward and Roger McNamee, an early and current Facebook investor and author of the best-selling book Zucked, which is now out in paperback this week. It is a must-read for anybody who's concerned about disinformation and misinformation. I want to start with Jake Ward. Jake, you and I have been talking about this for a long time. You have said for a couple of years now that this is what needs to happen. Independent researchers need to get their hands on this data to figure out what Facebook knows about us, how it may or may not manipulate us, and what we can actually prevent if we figure out the impact of social media on people's behavior.
That's absolutely right, Ali. I mean, this is an incredible moment, a historic moment. The idea that this research group, Social Science One, is going to get not just the sort of small surface level amount of data that you can get from any, cursory look at Facebook, but a real data set that will allow academics to look inside the company and see how are we sharing things across this platform? How does misinformation spread? How does a conversation, turn into hate speech? And does hate speech somehow stick in our minds more than the kind of innocent stuff that you and I might share about our families or our friends, right? The problem, of course, is that this is a thorny moment for Facebook. They're under a consent decree with the FTC. They had a huge fine for privacy violations, and so they have said we have to limit the amount of data. They are not giving these researchers what they had hoped for, which was a very specific individual level amount of data, the kind of data that Facebook uses every day to monitor what you and I look at and figure out. But it is a valuable thing because you're going to allow academics here, and it's got to be qualified academics. These are not, Cambridge Analytica types, hired guns. This is, qualified independent academics who've gotten approval from Social Science One can apply, get in there and see suddenly how the URLs that are being shared across Facebook may be sticking in our minds and changing democracy itself, Ali.
It is 5:45 in the morning where you are, my friend. I'm never that perky and alive at 5:45 in the morning. Roger McNamee.
Thank you, boss.
Jake described the fact that Facebook has had to put some sand into this in order to put it out there, to not violate their privacy decree, to not violate the European privacy laws, something that you in your book talk so much about, privacy, right? So how do we blend these two worlds? We want privacy and we want rules on Facebook, but boy, do we want to see this data.
Yeah, and Ali, let's remember the context for which this data was being released. This is a post-Cambridge Analytica, post-2016 election interference response. They were essentially under massive pressure to disclose. And I do not think it is a coincidence. They slow-walked this to the point where there's no way this is going to affect the 2020. We're not going to learn enough.
Meaning these researchers don't have enough time with this data.
Not to get to the actual granularity, because, again, they've thrown the sand into the gears. And I think in this case, Facebook is much more concerned about protecting its own business than it is about helping us get to the truth about what happened in 2016. And I think if you put this in the context of a company that recently changed its rules about fact-checking advertisements by campaigns, and just last week said, hey, in the context of Bloomberg, you can, as a campaign, pay influencers to put out memes and other content, and we're not going to fact-check that either. Facebook quite clearly has its thumb on the scale for this election. And so when I look at this, I think the privacy thing is a dodge for Facebook. It's not something that they're coming at sincerely.
Jake, what else can we learn, right? What's the best stuff that can happen? If researchers get their hands inside of Facebook and they see these things, is this just political behavior? Will we be able to detect when somebody's being radicalized? Can we tell before somebody goes out and commits a mass shooting?
Well, so what's so wonderful about this, Ali, right, is that like until now, basically you've only been able, the only people who've really had any kind of ability to go in and say, what's a good creative question we could ask about how humans are using Facebook and how it touches their brains are people inside Facebook, people on Facebook's payroll. In this case, you're going to have the creativity of independent academics saying, what questions can we ask? Can we ask whether, a post that is filled with hate speech suddenly, sticks and goes further and takes off in a way that we didn't realize it did, and in a way that's perhaps far more effective than, a post about puppies or a post about kids. And if in doing so we understand, there is a pattern to the way this stuff blossoms across a for-profit social media platform, maybe there's a way that those policies should change. Until now, we have been entirely hostage to, as Roger says, the profit motive of these companies, even though at the same time they can go in and look at any data they want about you and I on an individual basis. Now, in this case, the researchers are saying we're a little frustrated that we don't get that kind of data, that we can't draw the same kind of granular conclusions that people within Facebook can, but we'll take this differential analysis, it's called this sort of, higher level, more statistically noisy stuff, to be able to do some creative work by good independent academics, working at universities, working with federal funding to figure out the truth about how you and I are living our lives on Facebook these days.
So I think there's one thing I have to push back on what Jake's saying. I think that this is way better than nothing, and I'm really happy the data is out there. But I think at the end of the day, the problem that we're facing is that we know what the problems are. We actually do know how hate speech circulates. We actually have very good ideas how disinformation gets created and spread. I spoke last week about the group at George Washington University that is showing coordinated behavior of groups created in 2015 and 2016, still operating both for President Trump and for the Bernie Sanders campaign. And Facebook's refusal to do anything about this kind of stuff is a huge problem for democracy. And as much as I want to study all this stuff at a granular level, the high-level policy stuff should be really obvious to everyone. That Facebook right now, by its conscious actions, by its architecture, is undermining democracy. And we as a country should care much more about that than we do.
Thank you to both of you guys. I appreciate it. Roger, good to continue to see you here in New York. I know those days will come to an end fairly shortly. And Jake, bless you for getting up that early to have this discussion.
I can do that as well, just in case.
I know, but boy, it's hard with you California guys.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.